Hey, what do you know? This is the Melvin Live Show. How's everyone doing? I was just giving out some Clubhouse invites over Twitter. So, um, I'm going to get some more invites soon. So, if you want a Clubhouse invite, make sure you head on down to Twitter and follow me there. And, um, when I get a Clubhouse invite, I'll be sure to send you one. Now, how's everyone doing? And today I want to talk to you about strategy for small businesses. Now, the reason why I want to bring up this topic is simply twofold, right? And the number one reason is because I am a strategy guy. I have been in strategy consulting for more than 15 years. And so that's my cup of tea. That is something that I excel in. The other reason why I want to talk about strategy for the one person business is because in my experience working with small businesses, I find that many of them, many a times, they either start their business because the company that they used to work for was the boss. It's either an asshole or they just find that it's not worth their time to invest so much time, effort, and then energy into helping someone build their dreams, right? And so they decided to come out on their own and set up their own company. And so that's how they kind of first started. So they would do whatever they had known in the previous company, and they would do the same in this new company that they set up. The other reason why some of them would actually set out and start a company was because they have a scratch that they have an itch that they need to scratch. And so, one of the things perhaps was more like they wanted to, and, they wanted to have a taste of the whole experience of being an entrepreneur, being a businessman, and then starting out their own business itself. And so, those are usually the two most commonly um, type of reasons that people start their business. However, along the way, they will soon run into some kind of a plateau because they haven't quite have a strategy when it comes to, building their business and growing their business and expanding. And they, even though they started off as a one-person business and they probably grew to a, let's say, a 10-person business, and later on even to a 100 people business, they still run it like it's a one person business itself. And so there are certain things that because of that is very much founder dependent. And so in terms of the ability to scale, ability to grow, and ability to expand, it's really depends on just one person's ability. So that over reliance on the founder itself to kind of expand and to grow the company and to have that vision, it's not usually very feasible. And so they kind of rely on either consultants, or they along the way they realize of their limitation, whether they are egoistic or not. Then if they are not egoistic, that's when they are willing to bring in someone who is able to help them manage the company, grow the company, for example, right? And in my previous years of working as a consultant for small businesses, one of the fundamental thing that most businesses will be talking about is capital, right? And so they are always looking at ways to have what I would say cheap financing, because the whole idea with that is that if I am able to borrow money cheaply and I'm able to deploy the money into a more productive and more profitable venture itself, the money that I'm going to make, it's going to be far more than the money that I borrow. And of course, there are some people who borrow prudently, but there are some people whose entire company is run based on credit. And so, it's literally back to back. And so once a customer kind of default on them, it kind of impacts the entire chain of people. And so that's why there is such a dominoes effect, especially previously when we were in a recession, whereby once you have that situation whereby one big company, so like for example here in Singapore, like a big company like Robinsons, once a huge customer kind of fall apart, and then it will hit all the suppliers, and many of the suppliers are just teetering on that on very thin ice, in a sense that they need to get paid, and if they don't get paid for more than 3 months, they probably go under. And so, as you can see, many of them either do not have a strategy, or their strategy is I will wake up and I will see what happens and I will deal with it on a day-to-day basis. Now, so for us, our perspective itself, it's that's not quite a strategy. So when we talk about strategy, what exactly it is, right? So what do you think is your definition of strategy, right? Share with me in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to answer that. So what is your understanding, or what is your interpretation of what is strategy? Now, one way to look at it, very simple, is that when it comes to strategy itself, there is only one thing that we need to look at, right? And the one thing that we need to look at is this whole idea of play to win, right? So the way I like to look at it is that business is like a game, right? Business is a game. Now, in this game itself, there are certain pathways that you could take, and you would be able to achieve your goal. But there are other pathways that are probably uncharted, and so that kind of leaves you like you can go any way you want, but it may brings up a lot of surprises. And what's going to happen is along the way, what you need to do is you need to collect all these gems, and this gems is going to give you superpower, and this superpower would then enable you to kind of defeat the villains along the way. And if you are able to defeat the villains, congrats, you move on to the next level. But if you're not, then it's either you get stuck at that level or you eventually die. And so, the number of lives that you have on a game is just like the amount of resources that you have. And so, one very key thing to think about here is that, what are some of the strategies that you can really think of that you can put in place? These are what I call the core pillars, right? What are the core pillars that you can put in place, and to have a strategy for that, right? And so today I'm going to share with you, in terms of my own work as well as research that I've been doing. These are the various areas when it comes to strategy, right? So if you're here, just leave me a thumbs up if you are finding all this useful and exciting. Leave me a thumbs up from wherever you are watching me from, right? Or if you got any questions yourself, make sure you leave it in the comment. I'll be sure to check that out and answer that if it needs to be answered. Okay, let's see. Right, so strategies and the pillars. So let's start from the very beginning itself, right? So as a one person business, the key person, it's you. And the way to think about this is as follows. The actions that you take, it's going to determine whether you achieve the results that you want, right? So the actions that you take, it's going to determine the results that you want. Now, the actions that you take is probably going to base on two things. One, it's going to be based on what you've done in the past and what has worked. And that may be fine because, in some situation, the the way that the market works may not have changed very much. So what you've done in the past, what you're going to do now, that is something that is totally possible. And those are the actions. Now, but at some point in time, you may find that if you want to outpace the competition, if you want to do better than the competition, if you want to be different from the competition, then you have to do things that are different, right? So, if I can give you an example, when I started out consulting, um, you know, I had no track record, and so one of the things that I did was that I tried a bunch of things. But the one thing that stuck was that I walked into the organizations and I offer them a free audit. And in the free audit itself, I essentially look at what are the gaps that they have and then meticulously present a list of actions that they can take to bridge those gaps. And this was something that you know, all my competitors would not do. Why? Because they could literally just walk into any organization and show their track record, and more likely than not, they are going to get the job. And so, for me, if I'm going to use what they have been doing, I would not be able to get any projects at all. And so, I have to do something different. And in order to do something different, you have to think differently, right? So to steal Steve Jobs and Apple's tagline, think different, right? You got to think differently. And so the first pillar that I would share with you is that you have to think differently. Now, what does it mean to think differently? And that is where we can get into this topic at a deeper level. But essentially, what we're looking at here is that you want to be able to think strategically. Now, there are five aspects to thinking strategically. I won't go into that here in this video itself, but that's something that you would need to take note of. So, if you want to know what those five areas are, just type in five areas of strategic thinking, right? And I will do a video if I have sufficient request for that. Okay, so that's the five areas of strategic thinking. So, first, for you, you must have that strategic thinking, right? You must be able to think in a strategic way because by thinking in a strategic way, that's where you are able to come up with a different set of actions from the competitors. And if you have a different set of action, the chances of you being able to offer your clients a new way or a refreshing way of solving their problem, right, would be looked upon. So that's the first part, right? Strategic thinking. Now, the second thing that you would really need to think about is the idea of how do you get customers, right? How do you get customers? How do you get new businesses? And if I can share with you my own experiences, the best way to get new customers is actually through word of mouth. Because A, with that, you do not need any marketing fees. And B, word of mouth, it's usually 70-80% done deal. So when someone gives you word of mouth and you are recommended, and from that recommendation, if you are able to show and demonstrate that you can do the work, people are more than happy to want to work with you. So the best way is referral. But referral is something that it's built up over time. It's not going to happen overnight. And so, what is one aspect of it that you could look at when you are thinking about finding customers? And one of the best ways that I have done when it comes to finding customers is the following. Essentially, it's if you are able to get someone to pay you to teach them how to solve that problem, right? So if you are able to get someone to pay you to teach them how to solve that problem, and in doing so, you are able to demonstrate what you can do for them, that would be golden. Because imagine, every time you go on live, people would start paying you money to teach them something. And after you have taught them something and they have implemented it, they are going to come back to you for additional strategies, for additional support, for other other work that needs to be done. So, you want to be able to think of that. Now, when you're first starting out, of course, I think the easiest way is to find what you're good at, right? What are you proficient at? Look at what problems it solve, and then look at who are the people who have those problems. And once you've identified that, the key thing is really to launch into, just sharing freely with this group of people, right? Building trust, helping them sincerely. And, at the end of the day, these people may not become a client, but they can become your referral. So bear in mind that the second pillar, that it's, I think, is a challenge for most small businesses, myself included. And so that it's the way to do that. Now, to bring that to another level, essentially it's how can we use technology to replicate that, to do that? And that's what this whole, show is all about. Now, the third aspect, the third pillar that you will need to pay attention to would be, of course, the various systems that you have in place. And when I talk about systems, I'm not talking about IT systems. I'm not talking about, fancy system. A system could be just a set of processes that you have to do something, right? So, for example, I have a system for doing research on topics that I should cover, right? And how am I able to cover that? And what are the strategies that I'm going to use? And there has to be a process, right? There has to be a process, and that aggregated process to arrive at the outcome is a system. So a process could be, I have a process to get people to look at my newsletter. And speaking of newsletter, if you have not already subscribed, make sure you head on down to melvin.me, and that's where you can subscribe to the newsletter, right? So, newsletter, right? Newsletter is something that you can think of. So, for example, how you're going to get people to subscribe to your newsletter, that is a process. Now, once they have subscribed to the newsletter, what is it that you will do with them? That is a process itself. And then from there, to be able to nurture them, that it's also a process itself. And so this collective whole, it's going to be a system. So what is that system that you have, and I would say, there are certain small businesses that I know, and the reason why they are so successful but they are not able to sell their business is because they do not have a system. And remember earlier on, I say, it's a lot dependent on the founder. So being founder dependent and being overly, reliant on tacit knowledge to have processes, instead of processes, that's not going to get you to, being able to sell the business itself, right? So systems is something that you would need to look into as well. Now, so that's the third one. Now, the fourth one that I see that many businesses have, especially small businesses, many small businesses struggle with is this aspect of, finance. And when I talk about finance, I'm not just talking about how they balance their books and all that stuff, but essentially it's about a few things. One is that um, the way that they manage the cash flow, it's horrendous, right? And it's because of the way that they handle that cash flow that their business are not able to survive. And so a lot of time people talk about profitability and all that good stuff, but I always believe in cash flow, because once you have the cash flow itself, you can do many things that you want to achieve, right? So cash flow is another part of it. Now, the next area really for a one person business is, what is your strategy for managing workflow? Now, this is very similar to your system, but the system is something that can be automated. This is what I talked about, you managing yourself. So if you have a one person business, one of the key struggle that I see that many people face is burnout or fatigue. And myself included, I have been there, done that, and so I kind of know what it feels. And so there has to be a way to manage fatigue. There has to be a way to manage burnout itself. So you have to have a strategy for that, because like it or not, as a one person business, you are going to be that person who is going to run the business. So it's either going to be a lifestyle business or it's going to be a personal brand type of business, right? And so with that itself, really the key idea here is that you want to be able to look at what is the way that you manage your workflow and how do you do certain things, and with that, that's where you are able to have that balanced lifestyle, if you like, so that you do not get overwhelmed or you do not run into fatigue or you burn out, right? Now, another aspect of it, of course, is growth. And when it comes to a one person business, sometimes the idea is not so much to grow, but the idea is to be able to reach a certain level that you are comfortable in now, that is able to fund the lifestyle that you want and do whatever you want, right? And so that core idea behind that is that you want to be able to have that kind of freedom, but you also want to balance between growth and freedom. So that is something that you do also need to have a strategy about. And so, those are the key pillars that you are going to have to put in place. So number one is your thinking, right? Number two, it's how do you find customer. Number three is you got to have a system. Number four is that you have to be able to manage your finances. Number five is that you have to be able to manage your own workflow. Number six is really about balancing growth and freedom. And if I can give you a last one, right, a last bonus one, the last bonus, what you might call, strategy, or the area, the pillar that you must have when it talked about being a one person business. This is oftentimes, something that people overlook, right, including myself, right, including myself. And that area that many of us overlook, it's the idea of being too dependent on just one income stream. And having just one income stream, it's really bad, because this is where you are not able to um, really push yourself, because if that one, you have to watch that one income stream, because once that one income stream dries up itself, then you're going to run into problem, right? So if you're thinking about building this one person business, you gotta have multiple income streams, and that's what I'm working on, and that's what I have established, and that is partly why, compared to many of the other people, the COVID-19 was not a huge, huge, huge negative for me, right? So that's something that you would really want to take note of. Okay, so that's what we have for you here today in terms of the show. You want to tune back next couple of episodes itself. I'm going to mix things up a little bit because otherwise it gets a bit monotonous. And so, if you got some feedback, you'd like me to cover certain areas, make sure leave that in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please can I ask you to, consider going down to this URL and subscribing to Melvin.tv. That it's the YouTube channel. So if once you're there and once you click on once you type in the URL itself, you will be taken to the YouTube channel, and the subscribe button will come up. And if it's something that you are interested in, then go ahead and subscribe. If it's not, we're cool. All right. And so with that, I thank you so much for watching. And let me know if you got any questions or if you got any suggestions in terms of other areas that you would like me to cover. I'll be more than happy to take a look at them. And if not, I wish you guys stay safe. And guys, I see you on the next one. Right. Bye bye.